Welcome to the Ascension Alchemists podcast. This is your host, Michael Abramson, and I'm grateful that you're all joining here on my solo episode. Today, I'm very excited to just talk about what I feel many men are moving through right now. As many of you know, I work with a lot of men in becoming the conscious, evolved, greatest version of ourselves. And that's where I really feel this great passion to share this with men and all those that are listening that can help bring forth this greater awareness. Where I feel like we're in this huge time of awareness that's awakening within all of us, especially with our dear sacred masculine. So once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing this. For those men that would feel open to receive what I always say are these great nuggets of wisdom that not only do I get to experience and share, but I feel I get to help others really activate a greater aspect of themselves. And today, what I really want to focus on, which I've seen happening within myself and the many men that I work with, whether it's in beautiful online conscious evolved men's gathering, or whether I'm in person in sacred beaches such as Siesta Key, to bring forth what I see a higher awakening of our heart. And what I see that really is moving from our mind to our heart and awakening our heart-centered consciousness. For growing up, it's really interesting to look at what us men have gone through. For we've been trained to live from this mind, this survival mind, this ability which we calculate, promote, analyze, predict, speak in this certainty. Yet I believe there comes a point in a man's life that no matter how much of the success, no matter how much achievement, there's still this feeling of incompleteness because we're lacking a greater aspect. And that really is our heart-centered consciousness. Working with so many men, it's been amazing to see that this beautiful, amazing mind of ours actually sometimes closes off our heart in protecting us, which actually isolates us. And it's interesting because we may all look good on the outside, all smart, savvy, and in this way that we have it all. Yet sometimes we're hurting on the inside because we're not living from the truth of who we are. We're living from this beautiful mind. And really what I've seen in this time of spring, this beautiful story. And this story that I really see has been this program, this condition of what a man's supposed to be. That strong man, the provider. Yes, the sacred masculine is there. Yet sometimes that story of the man in our society has really shown a little emotion or shown a little feeling or even shown little compassion because we've cut off that valve to stay more in the story of who we think we are. And you know what's really interesting about that story is that beautiful, wonderful ego of ours loves to create that. Based on our personality, based on our job, our relationship, our titles that we've occurred. But isn't it interesting? This story is some exterior version of who we think we are. And I was having a conversation with a friend this week, and I was saying, is it interesting that this story is what we shape and what we believe who we are? But underneath, sometimes we don't feel truly to that because it's only based on how the ego sees it, on external validation, external approval, external safety, because we're looking outward to see who we are versus really living inward in our heart to remember how we truly are. And when I say how, that life source of infinite energy of what we were created from, that God Almighty presence. The reason I share this is because I feel there's such an important movement happening right now within men, shifting from that mental consciousness that has governed us for so long, and now moving to this heart-centered consciousness that I literally work with and help bring that awareness, whether it's in men's circles, mentorship, or one-on-one healing sessions. It's been amazing to see that a lot of us men have only been taught one version of ourselves. And then there's another incomplete nature that has really been shut off because we've unconsciously closed our hearts up. And I've seen this so many times in myself where when my mind gets so busy, it's because somewhere in my heart I've closed and I've stopped listening to the great emperor, the great strong-hearted being that wants to take the lead. We've heard the expression lion heart versus lion mind. That strength and power within our heart wants to speak, but sometimes we give the driving wheel to that mental body. And so once we start to break it down a little and see how we're supposed to go deeper in recognizing what our common traits are, because if we really think about it, a lot of us men, because we live in the mind, we're on this fight or flight, dysregulated central nervous system. And when we start putting the pieces together in the equation of life, our ego, that mask, that distortion of who we are, just based on our normal personality and characteristics, nothing right, wrong, good, or bad, just is, even though the ego wants to make duality right or wrong out of judgment. It's interesting because when we look at the ego, it wants to feel safe. It wants to feel in a place where it has control. It also does not like change. But then when you look at it, the external nature of what our ego thrives upon is external validation, external acceptance, external nature of who we are. Our ego wants to create that identity for who we are, staying in that control, safety, and comfort, in that level where it resists change. Because when we look at it, anytime that we base our identity outside of ourselves, we're living in this unstable world because change is constant and we can't control. Yet that's how the ego validates itself. So imagine that the ego is in this constant fight or flight, which it likes to stay in that control. Yet somewhere it's fighting against itself because it wants to stay in change and comfort. But the outward world and society, we can't control or change. It happens due to the divine nature of ashes to ashes, dust to dust, the law of deterioration, the law of dissolvement. There's all these areas that resolve. So once we start becoming more aware of this ego and this mindset and how it operates, we then can gradually move to an ultimate shift. And that shift is the heart, the place where it feels, the place where intuition evolves, and the place that I feel is where the greatest portal of ourself is active to the divine. Yet, it does require what I call the longest journey from the mind to the heart, a conscious awareness to see how we can start opening ourselves up to feel safe, letting the strong shield out of our heart open so that we can fully feel and experience what I believe God Almighty has naturally given us. How many men would you say you're aware of that have closed their heart and they stay stuck in their heads because somewhere there's the fear of being hurt or the fear that something will affect them in a negative way that they can't control? Have you noticed, even within myself, when that top-heavy mind gets so busy, It's because somewhere we've closed our hearts so deeply because of pain, trauma, hurt, or just any levels of abandonment and rejection. I share this because the greatest awareness we can do is bring that into our presence to see how we can live in our true authenticity, in our true act of transparency. Because that's where we're moving right now. And that's why I get so excited to help men remember that by living in their true state and their authentic nature, that everything starts to move through ease and grace. Yet sometimes when we move in that monkey mind of ours, we're still operating from survival. It wants to survive versus the heart. It wants to live. Somewhere, this mind wants to have this illusion of control, controlling the outcomes, overthinking and responsibility, giving distance to that emotional part, because even some of us believe that being emotional is more feminine. And the male wants to stay more masculine because it rejects the feminine aspects, when truly it's about merging the unification of our feminine and masculine. So the mind is there of great importance, and I feel it's so wonderful to unite that mind and into our heart for this beautiful coherence. The key is remember that the heart, it's not an emotion, it's an intelligence. It's a powerful source that allows us to have this great connection to Divine Almighty. And you know what I've learned, especially working with men, is many of us are very sensitive. And many of us have an amazing, incredible heart, but somewhere we've closed it because we're afraid if we open it again, that somewhere we may be taken advantage of. Somewhere we may feel judged. Even sometimes we may feel this inadequacy, because if we feel this vulnerable sensitivity, we may feel like we're too open for something bad to happen. So that's why it's important to bring that wonderful coherence of that divine mind into that divine heart by recognizing this beautiful mind of ours, this beautiful heart of ours is an expression of God Almighty that is here to unite. Here to bring forth what I feel the greatest version of ourselves. That is why I have created this wonderful 12-week program called The Conscious Evolved Man, in which 12 principles, which I believe have come through me to help men remember and how they can be their greatest expression. When we look at nature, when we look at life, naturally, it becomes a process of expression. Yet sometimes this funny mind holds our expression back because it only lives in the condition that was taught. And you know what's funny? When we live in conditions, there becomes a limitation of how we believe and how we feel, because what the mind doesn't know, it fears. Yet, when we step out of the earthly condition, out of the programs, we start to live a more expansive way that the heart already knows, because the heart can feel beyond what the mind can see. And that's one of the greatest things that I personally have found, because when I feel in the heart, and when connecting with other men that can feel, there becomes this resonance. How many of you have noticed, whether male or female, gender, base, whatever you are in coordinates to, when there is that feeling in the heart and connection, there is this unspoken word where the mind doesn't even have to say anything. There's this connection. And that's a place where I feel many of us are striving or wanting, because in that heartfelt connection, it feels so divine, so joyful, and so just full of life. Living in the head, many times, there becomes this point where it just feels very mechanical. And that's where a lot of our limited beliefs or fears come from. Yet what happens when we move into the heart? What happens when we fully embody this heart-centered state of living? We become more grounded instead of guarded. We're more present instead of performance-based. We're more responsive versus reactive. And we're more connected versus isolated, because there is this heart presence that I believe that is growing and expanding, not only through us men, but through this earth and through the sacred feminine. And so a lot of times it's now becoming greater importance to bridge the head to the heart. And what happens if it just becomes an ability of an awareness shift? Am I thinking this, or am I feeling this? Imagine how many times we can stop to say, am I thinking or feeling? It's so simple, yet it's so profound, because what I recognized is when we feel, there's a greater vibration and frequency than versus what we think. And sometimes this thinking wants to take control. It's like, oh, I know how I feel. Yet the mind only knows how to think. It doesn't know how to feel. The heart knows how to feel. So imagine when we're in that moment, we can easily stop and ask that question. And of course, if we're in our head, what I ask many men to do in their presence is just to place the hand on the chest. And if you're in a position that you're not driving or you're listening, place your hand on your chest and take a slow inhalation through your nose. And then a longer exhale. And feel that beautiful heartbeat under your hand. Feel your heart. And know that your heart space is this growing space that is allowing each of us to come in contact with the greatest essence that is within. The heart is the king. It's the beat of life. We can live without a mind. We sure can't live without a heart. So, what happens if we're in the mind and we're distracted and we're thinking? Could we start to shift that analysis, that processing, with just presence, where we step back? This is an exercise I love to use. Imagine when we're thinking, we're doing, we're busy, and we just step back and listen. Not even respond, just listen to what's happening before us. And when I say listen, listen through the lens of the heart. Feeling what's happening without judgment, because the heart doesn't know judgment. It knows discernment of what it feels. So when we step back and replace that analytical mind by presence, then we can start to just feel with what and truly we are. You know, I feel right now there's this absolute incredible maturity happening within our masculine hearts. Because in that heart-centered nature, I feel our role is to show women that as the protectors, as the strong men coming forward, that we hold the compassion in safety, and we hold the love within our ability to stand strong next to them versus just thinking or fixing our way through it. Because I know many of us, we want to fix it, we want to solve it, we want to build it, which is perfect. Yet sometimes it just requires us just to be compassionate and not so aggressive, strong without this hardness. It's so interesting when we look at how we can bring our head to our heart in just the remembrance that we already carry that wisdom within us. And imagine that wisdom is seated in the heart. And now it becomes our journey to open our heart and release that wisdom. Imagine each day creating heart expansive exercises, whether it's through gratitude, whether it's through some self-love, self-care activities, that in opening that heart space, it brings our mind into greater peace and relaxation, and it opens up the door for greater love to flow. I'm a firm believer and know that as this conscious expansion is moving through this world, great men of great hearts are going to be leading in a whole different direction. And as we can tell what's happening in our collective right now, it's being done by a mental, without feeling, without sensitivity, without compassion, that's showing the result that is not in full unification. Yet when there becomes the day when men step forward and lead from their heart and listen to how this sacred beat is guiding us, there's going to be true evolutionary change that is right here, right now. And that's why I get so excited to work with these men, because I know I am a heart-centered conscious leader that is destined to bring these men together. So for those that know of beautiful men, beautiful hearts, they may need a little nudge. They may need a little awareness of who they are, whether it's through my mentoring, whether it's through my online Conscious of All Men or my in-person men's circles. I create this sacred space, this beautiful energy to allow men to open and awaken to their greatest version. And by opening and awakening their heart, they have the opportunity to feel safe, to voice their opinion and be held in a respected, honored, sacred energy of brotherhood. To me, connection is what I feel is yearning through many of us. And as a conscious, heart-centered man, it brings such joy with sitting with other brothers that can wholeheartedly feel this connection. Because really, at the end of the day, when we feel our wholesome nature, then there becomes this completion of joy, happiness, and peace that naturally runs through us. And what happens if it's just taking the longest journey from the head to the heart? And not fighting the head, not dismantling it, not kicking the ego out, because the ego is only what makes us human. So we have to love that too. Yet honoring that the ego isn't a fight and flight survival mechanism, and the heart is in a living mechanism to be its fullest version. There are those that are going to be on this loop of survival, victim, and constant fight or flight. And there's going to be others that are going to choose to stay in their heart so they can feel the fullest version, because in our heart is the greatest force of this whole world, and that is divine love. And that connects us to so many aspects, not only within us, but outside of ourselves. So for all the men that are listening, and women, what happens if we can take this time period, this very powerful time on this first week of April, and see how we can choose to live, to think, to act from our heart, to breathe, to feel that nourishment of self-love, self-care, self-respect, self-honor. And notice what happens to ourselves as we emanate that, not only within us, but all around us. Because what I'm seeing now is the greater we can expand our heart vibration, that frequency expands to everything and everyone around us. So just imagine, the more you open your heart, the more you're affecting everyone around you. The more you're affecting everyone around you, you're creating this incredible, amazing, joyful, loving, peaceful vibration that's giving the world a greater alignment of what we all came here to live in peace, in harmony, the natural state of our well-being. Our heart is a constant reminder that it keeps beating and flowing. And when it's in that accordance with the rest of our body and not controlled by the mind and not influenced by outside factors, then we're living in what I say is the greatest and fullest expression of our life that we're meant to be and feel and experience with each and every one around us. So feel your heart. Listen through the heart and see how the heart wants to lead you versus the mind controlling how it chooses to live the day. Because there is a shift, there's a moment, and there's an awakening right now where we're literally moving from the mind to the heart in awakening heart-centered conscious man. So once again, thank you for all that have joined on this wonderful episode. To learn more about these programs, please email us at info@ascensionalchemists.com. I am inspired, I am passionate, and I love to bring forth this beautiful awareness, this great wisdom that can help serve the many men that are here to rise as the great sacred divine masculine. Once again, thank you for all that are joined on this wonderful podcast episode. And from my heart to yours, I wish you a most beautiful, blessed day.